At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 300 programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Rise up! Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the USA Today NFL Wire site, covering, of course, your Arizona Cardinals. Episode 665 after a week off. Seth Cox, my co-host from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, SB Nation's Arizona Cardinals site, is with me to record this show on a Tuesday afternoon as we are in the dead of the offseason. They're throwing us some bones. I haven't listened to Rabbit Taylor Demerson's press conference. They've been throwing us, media people, reporter people, analyst people a bone by getting a player up to do a presser every now and again. But we are in the part where we have to make stuff up, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just one of those things that, you either grab a piece of news that comes along that has anything to do with the Arizona Cardinals, something we'll discuss a little later, or, like you said, you're going off of listicles, you're lamenting the quarterback or running back or wide receiver or offensive line rankings that are getting put out. Like, it's just
rankings and projections. Ranking projections and do it again.
Right, exactly. And it's just, it's just a lot of downtime. And so it's not a bad thing. It's just, makes this time of year seem to go by rather slowly, because you're like, all right, when can we start talking a little bit about what's actually going to happen?
But we do have news, as the Arizona Cardinals released their training camp schedule as it starts a month from today. Well, they will report for camp. They will report for camp on July 22nd, but 1 month from today, July 24th, they will hold their first open practice of training camp at State Farm Stadium, a yearly tradition like no other, where you can attend and watch those practices for free, park for free. The players are pretty good off time, so some of the players after every practice usually hang around and sign autographs, especially for the youngsters. It's not like I think we're almost to the point where there's not many people who remember how training camp went when it is up at Flagstaff at NAU. And I know the accommodations are much better for the players now, as they were staying in, college dorms, but the fan experience is something different, and it is the trend around the league.
Yeah, it is. And it's just about, a little bit about saving money, right? Like, that's part of it. We have to be honest. And then it's a little bit about convenience. And quite frankly, I mean, the old school training camp thing, it was to get away, right? It was to get away from the family. It was to get away from, don't you remember they used to bring TVs and like video game consoles?
They would bring their because these are like literally I think they're the athletic dorms, and so they're slightly bigger. But if anyone remembers college dorms, they are not large. They would bring their custom mattresses, their televisions, their game setups, and then they'd make the 2.5 hour drive up north. There were some things that were a little bit tricky, because if anyone got hurt, then they had to drive them down back to Phoenix, downbound to Tempe to do their medicals and their MRIs. And so everything is close. But I will say this, having experienced the Flagstaff situation years ago, it almost feels like there was when they moved to State Farm Stadium, it sort of lost a little bit of that youthful innocence because kids could get right up next to the players. I took my two boys one year, and it was really cool. They had conversations with a few players. They got lots of autographs. It was after Kevin Cobb was traded to the Cardinals, and my oldest, after the Cardinals' first practice, Cobb stuck around and signed autographs, and Diego got his towel, his hand towel from practice that day, and we've got it on display, and then a football with a whole bunch of the 20 and 11 Cardinals signatures. I've got it in my, the back of my office here now.
Yeah, and that used to be the little thing, or the little things that made that experience unique. And it was different, it was a destination thing, and now it's just at the Cardinal Stadium that, let's be honest, for half the state, it's still a destination thing, right?
It is.
But overall, it's just one of those things that you look at, and now you kind of plan it out, right? And you and I were talking about a little bit off the air with the way that the schools have changed their scheduling. It's not very kid friendly.
It's not like where I work. The first day of school is July 17th. It's something absurd. And yeah, by the first practice is September 24th, and the last practice the fans can attend is August 6th. And most schools around the valley are in session by the start of August anymore.
Right. And so you look at a couple of features, right? There's only one Saturday practice, which we'll go over, but there's 2 Friday practices. And so it's like, all right, do I want to take my kid out of school the first or second week of school to go watch the Cardinals practice for an hour and a half? Because that's all there is too, right? I know they open a little early and things like that, but they'll be on the field for an hour and a half. Those are quick, those are quick days. So, maybe it's conducive to that. I don't know, but 2 Friday open practices, the 25th of July, and then August 1st. Like I said, both an hour and a half. One of the things that we do recommend is, if you are interested in going, make sure you follow the Cardinals on social media, whether it's X or whatever. They do every once in a while shift practice time. So like, if you're going to plan to go right Friday, let's just say August 1st, and you're making your day based around that 1:45 to 3:15 practice time, just check in, make sure that they don't move it up. Yeah, because I do think that happened once last year, and they moved it up to like 10:30 to noon or something like that. And so it's just one thing to think about and check in on simple things like that. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, another thing that you and I talked about off the air, there's very limited open practices to be able to go check out.
Yeah, it's there are only nine open practices. There is an additional practice on Sunday, the 27th of July, but that is the back together weekend, and that is a only season ticket holders and club seat members type thing. The NFL used to have, the NFL used to have league-wide a back together weekend, and that has turned into something for season ticket holders. And then the Cardinals always have a red and white practice where they do a little extra. It used to be a bigger deal than it is now. Now it's just kind of like a regular practice, but it would mean that there were 2 full weekends where you could go watch. Now, the number of open practices has gone down. This year, there's only 9 open practices plus the one for season ticket holders. Last year, there were only 9 plus 1 for season ticket holders. Gannon's first year, there were 11. If those of you can remember back to the days of Bruce Arians, they often had 16, 17. I think there was one year they had as many of like 20 open practices, and that has been pared down. over the years to make it. So it's hard, Cardinals fans, to go have that training camp experience. I mean, you have the one Saturday, August 2nd, the red and white practice. That one will be heavily attended. But other than that, kind of the day-to-day ones, it's going to be really hard because all of them are in the early afternoon. And it's interesting also for me is, Cliff Kingsbury liked to vary the practices to try and mock and mimic some of the different type of schedules that they would have during the season. And Gannon is choosing just afternoon. So 1:25, 1:45, 1:15. So right around hold those practices when during the season are going to be local time games. So it's like here games kick off at 1:05, 1:25, 2:05, 2:25 after November. And then when they go back east, then it is also 1 p.m. local time, that type of situation as well. And so it's going to be tough to get out there. And also, if you come from the East Valley, trying to during the week, no, thank you.
Yeah, that drive home would be terrible.
Not only home, but there. My gosh, even 2 p.m. like afternoon, just driving through downtown, having to go through downtown Phoenix for any of that gick. That is rough, and I think it just shows that while the Cardinals have made a lot of gains in trying to improve fan experience, the one cost of all of that, they are decreasing the fan experience at training camp. Not that necessarily is a bad thing, but it is something if for a long time Cardinals fans, they notice, training camp used to be super accessible, and it is getting to be less accessible. It's less often and fewer opportunities for fans to see it. Now, we're not like other teams that their practices aren't even open to fans because of where they go, or like the Seahawks, you can go to it, but you have to pay for a bus ride because it's not just a regular drive-up type situation. So, yeah, I mean, the Cardinals still have a fairly fan-friendly. It's just less fan-friendly than it's ever been.
Correct. And it seems to be going the way of other teams and limiting the access and limiting how often, you can get out there to enjoy it. But that also coincides with how little they do, it seems like, on those days, right?
Yeah, that is true. And there's a lot of reason, like there is a lot of research. There is a lot of sports science that goes into it. They're trying not to overload the athletes' bodies. And while old school would be, we've got to batter those bodies and toughen them up for the season. There were also tons and tons of injuries back then. And even still, you're trying to, the way teams try to do it, they're trying to limit the offseason injuries because, like, why do you want your guys getting hurt before they're actually playing real football? It's a fine line they tread because you need to get their bodies ready, but also you don't want to train so hard that your important players are hurt before the season begins.
Yeah, and that's the fine line that teams are finding that they have to walk now, and just trying to make sure that these kids or these guys are healthy going into the season. We're able to be at full strength. One of the things we talked about last year when you just look at things like the Super Bowl, part of that was just attrition of injuries. On one side of the bracket, you had the Detroit Lions, who basically were down to you and me playing along their defensive front seven. And then on the other side, you had the Eagles, who just seemed to not just be healthy, but, rounding into form with guys like Jalen Carter and Josh Sweat and those guys. And so it makes the season even more difficult because you have to find that delicate balance of, okay, we got to make sure we're healthy going into the season, but we got to be prepared for the season as well.
Coming up next on the Rise of Secret podcast, Mr. Cardinals Talk on Love. Let's move on and talk about it. We've got 3 topics we're talking about. We talked about one. Coming up next is something that a former Cardinal said about the Cardinals and what we think about that. That's coming up next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. One of the things, again, this is not even things that's related to the Cardinals now, but it is about a former Cardinal who said something that, while wasn't directly referring to the Cardinals, it did refer to them at least, and that is Isaiah Simmons, our favorite kind of recent bust for the Cardinals, now with the Green Bay Packers. He played 2 years with the Giants. In fact, Simmons, who had some productive seasons here in 2021 and 2022, but then was not a fit with Jonathan Gannon's team, got traded to the Giants. He spent 2 years there, and now he's moving to Green Bay. And what did he say about Green Bay? Now, he's toned the line. He said this. He is happy that under Packers defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley, he's focused only on one position at linebacker. And this is what he said. I think really what I ran into most of my career is everybody wants me to do everything as opposed to letting me get really good at one thing first. I fully believe in Haf's plan. He's letting me just lock in and learn a small portion first before we even think about expanding to anything else. That's something I really appreciate because I never really had that opportunity to really just hone in on one position. Just being able to lock in on one thing and do that 1 out of 11 every day, that's been huge for me. What nonsense, in my opinion. Tell me, what do you think about this, Seth?
It's just one of those things that you watch or look at and you kind of follow along with. And I think so much of it comes down to guys don't want to be the reason for their own failure. So it's got to be somebody else's fault. You look back in Vance Joseph, he was with Vance Joseph to start his career. And it seemed like Vance was just wanting him to be a linebacker. Now, albeit he wanted him to be in the Fred Warner mold, right?
Right. It's like he had him doing like the sliding over into the slot or dropping back into coverage, even like all of that, but from a linebacker point of view. He was still doing all of those things. Although he did end up playing inside and outside. He did play some edge as well those first couple of years because of what the Cardinals needed. But that said, geez.
Right. And so you look at that and, it's just one of those things that I think it's unfortunate that it didn't work out. But at the same time, you look at opportunities and you can't say that this guy hasn't had opportunities. I mean, again, we can chalk up a lot of different things to the rookie season, right? I mean, obviously there was the reality of coming in and, having to play or being that COVID class. And we know how much that hurt so many players, and then kind of getting yanked around after that first season. But after that, it just, it seemed to be a continuation of inability to grasp concepts. I know for Gannon and company, a lot of it came down to they didn't like his effort that they saw on film, and so they came in with the idea of, hey, let's focus you on one position, and they just didn't really see eye to eye.
Well, that's the thing that I find the most interesting. He's talking about I'm so happy that the Packers are just having me hone in on one position. This isn't the first time that someone did that. The last time someone did that was the Cardinals in 2023 when Jonathan Gannon came in and said, "You're a safety." What?
Yeah.
He said, "You're a safety. We're going to play at safety." They moved Zaven Collins inside to outside and moved Isaiah from inside to safety and gave him that one spot. And the fact of the matter is, I think it's a little disingenuous for him to talk about like his 2 actual good seasons in the NFL were with the Cardinals. in 2021, he had 105 tackles. He had an interception, 1.5 sacks. In 2022, he had 2 interceptions. He had 7 pass breakups, 4 sacks, 91 tackles. He did a lot. And that year in 2022, especially, he was their main slot guy as well. So he was playing inside backer and then sliding out to the slot. And outside of that game, that opener against Kansas City, which was an abomination, he wasn't a liability in the slot. And people tend to forget that. And here's the thing about Simmons. He wasn't a culture fit here because and we go back to when he was with Vance Joseph, he was very up and down with how locked in he was in practice. He admitted that. Vance Joseph alluded to it, that after he got benched, he locked in and earned a spot back in the lineup. But when he had long stretches where he wasn't being held accountable, he would not lock in practice. There were mental lapses. And then, of course, like the famous one was the preseason game when he just quit on the deep pass that he got burned on, and he didn't even make an effort. And Cardinals fans remember that. And then but he wasn't a culture fit. I don't think he liked what Jonathan Gannon was saying. He was butting up with DeAndre Hopkins, who was trying to get himself out of Arizona. But the thing is, Simmons hasn't done much in the 2 years that he was gone. And remember, Wink Martindale is going to be great for him. Simmons wasn't great.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of it. And you and I talked about this when they drafted Simmons, because I had some reservations about the pick from the beginning, most notably being it took, 3 years and basically the defense being built around Simmons by Brett Venables while he was at Clemson to really become the player he was. And that's always it's interesting how concerns of, late breakout or 1 year wonders, so to speak, are so prevalent on the offensive side of the ball, right? But on the defensive side of the ball, it's not something that people worry about. And you just, you look at his last season at Clemson, and it was beyond fantastic, right? Like, I mean, this was a guy that was the Dick Butkus Award. He was a consensus All-American, the ACC Defensive Player of the Year for, the defending national champs. Now, they didn't win the championship his final year, but the year before, when he was contributing, they did. And so all of those things you look at, but it's like if you're that good, why did it take that long for you to become that good? Like, why did it take so much? And then the interesting part of it being, I was never able to focus on one position. Well, wasn't that kind of what made you unique? Is your ability? And
he wanted it. Like, right. When he was here, he wanted that. He thrived on that. He loved playing everything. He said he wanted to be greatest all the spots. You know what? I'm starting to get, because the Giants primarily used him as a DB, as a safety. That's how he was listed. He did play a little bit versatile type stuff, but when he was asked to be defensive back primarily, I think maybe that's what he's saying, that he wants to be a linebacker, and he's happy that Hafley's putting him just at linebacker instead of a safety that can come up in the box and play, or a linebacker that slides into the slot. I don't know what that is, but
well, what's interesting, or what has always been interesting, and one of our buddies, Blake Murphy, has kind of talked about since he was drafted all those years ago, was always that, like, this dude did no agility testing, right? Like, so he's this explosive linear athlete, like, there's no question about that, but we don't have any like pro agility numbers on him. And Blake always hypothesized that was, done for a reason, that he wasn't exactly overly explosive laterally, right? Like that he was more of a linear kind of downhill guy, and because he was so big and so fast in college, he got away with it. But once you get to the NFL, everybody's that fast, right? Like, and I know it's overstating it just a little bit, but everybody's athletic. Everybody is incredibly fast, and we've talked about it before. I think this guy even played at Arizona, right? The Thomas Howard kid out of UTEP. Those guys come along pretty often, and so what ends up happening is it's like, are you able to utilize that athleticism for anything more than just being really fast in a straight line? And it kind of ended up being that no, Isaiah Simmons wasn't able to do that. And again, that's not taking away from what Isaiah Simmons was as a prospect, but it does lend some credence to things like, hey, we need you to be able to run and cover with guys, and yeah, that small undersized slot receiver that you were able to bully and run with out of Wake Forest, or whoever they were playing that day. Because remember, it's not like the ACC was exactly teeming with talent at that time.
No. It was definitely a powerhouse in that conference,
right? And you look at these games that they played, right? Georgia Tech 52-14, Syracuse 41-16, North Carolina was close, Florida State was down at that time, they beat them 45-14, Louisville was down 45-10, Boston College 59-7. Like, he wasn't lining up against NFL talent. And it's something that we talk about all the time with Bama, Georgia, players like that, right? Like how do they play against the other big boys? How do they handle playing against the Titans from the other SEC teams or outside the conference? And that's really what we judge them off of. And at this time, it was just Clemson was just so much more talented than literally every single team in the SEC or the ACC. Like, just not even particularly close. And that all kind of played out in that way. And so again, it's not, I don't blame Simmons outside of I think he's a bit disingenuous on how much he was open to doing things and willing to work at things and things of that nature. And some of that could just be, right, like you said, you get with another toxic teammate, in this case DeAndre Hopkins, who was just disenchanted with where he was with the Cardinals and wanted out. And it changes, your work ethic and your desire to be a part of something new. Because remember, that was going to be brand new for him. Like, it was going to be something different. And so under Jonathan Gannon and Nick Rallis and those guys. So it in a way makes sense, but it is also, like you said, a little disingenuous on his part.
Coming up next on the Rise of Series podcast, Best Our Cardinals talking about. We have one topic left that we're going to go into, and it is, owner collusion, right? And we'll talk about how that impacts the Cardinals, how they're involved. That's coming up next on the Rise of Series. We're back on the Rise of Series podcast, Best Our Cardinals talk on the web. There is nothing more NFL than owners colluding, and apparently Kyler Murray and his contract is wrapped up in this. As Pablo Torre, former ESPN reporter, he has an investigative podcast, Pablo Torre Finds Out, and there is a 61-page document from last year when the NFL players lost a claim that the league was colluding to prevent teams from offering fully guaranteed contracts. And we get some text messages from Michael Bidwill and Steve Keim, and between Michael Bidwill and the Chargers owner Dean Spanos, Oh man. Nothing like, I mean, no one is surprised that the league is colluding and couldn't quite get, but at the same time, we're also not surprised that they didn't get punished for it.
No, I mean, it was something we've talked about before. I mean, the reality is, and we know for a fact, and we've never I mean, we've talked about it, but we've never really gone into a deep dive about it. But the reality is that we know that the Cardinals are, I don't even want to say pressured anymore. The reality is that Michael Bidwill won't do something that rocks the boat.
No, he is not a trendsetter when it comes. And the Cardinals, as an organization, are not trendsetters. They are not ones to pioneer or be the first to do something when it comes to player contracts. That's honestly, we talked about that. This is why they refused to do Kyler Murray's deal until the summer. They're like, we're not going to do that. It's not time. We've got free agency. We've got the draft. Then after that is when we do the extensions. This is the first off. I mean, the fact that Trey McBride got his extension early in the offseason, that is a new trend that the Cardinals didn't set.
Right. And that's just the reality of it, that they'll never be the first team. And you're seeing why. What Jimmy Haslam did, whether we agree or disagree, all the other outside stuff aside, we have our opinions on the Deshaun Watson situation and the fact that was just
a terrible deal. It was a terrible deal, but
absolutely stupid, dumb, all of the above. And then to pay him $900 billion or whatever it was, guaranteed money, I don't even remember, was just
$230 million fully guaranteed.
And it just set such a bad precedent. But we have to remember,
once the precedent is set. Yeah.
Yeah, but Haslam at the time had, only been an owner for a decade at that point, and so he was still relatively new in terms of ownership. Whereas, I know Bidwill's only technically been the owner for about a decade or a little more than a decade now, but the reality is he was never, ever going to do something that was against the whole of the NFL, because they follow the rules. Their legacy, that, and again, we've talked about this 100 times. This is all the Bidwills have. They're not outside rich. I mean, Haslam has that trucking business. Whatever. Gosh. And so they have money. Like the NFL is a hobby for them. Now, don't get me wrong; it's still an expensive hobby, but it's a hobby for them. For Bidwill and the Bidwill family, it is their lifeblood. It is what has made them billionaires. It is what makes them rich. It is what makes them tick. And so, the expectation of guys like Bidwill, the guys like who was the one that just passed away that owns the Bears? I can't remember. McCaskey, right?
Yeah.
The McCaskies, the Fords, all of those
the Hines, the McCaskies, the Fords, all those long timers.
Yeah, they're going to toe the line. They're never going to, like you said, set the precedent or anything like that. It's just going to be, they're going to be a part of things, but they're never going to set the standard. And so it makes sense that, Michael towed the line and was part of that group and everything, but also did nothing and kind of talked about it.
Well, what's interesting is we learn a little bit more about the contract. We remember when Eric Burkhart, Murray's agent, wrote that manifesto that early, it was in the spring, I think it was in March, and he's saying, hey, we need to get our quarterback paid, and we need to get the coach paid, and we need to get the GM paid, right? And we learned that there was a contract offer made, that Burkhart presented a contract to the team that actually ended up being a lower per year. They would have saved about $5 million per year. I believe it was an estimated $42 million per year. But here's the part that was not reported at that time. So according to this, in the spring of 2022, after the Watson deal was announced, so he got his $230 million fully guaranteed deal from the Browns. Murray's agent communicated to the Cardinals, guess what? A fully guaranteed deal was important to Murray. And that was, and based on that timeline, that would make sense. So what the Cardinals, what Burkhart presented to the Cardinals was a deal that was worth probably $42 million per year. So it was probably, 225 or matched it 210 to $225 million fully guaranteed.
Right.
And then there were some texts between Keim and Bidwill that we're going to load up his contract with so many exemptions to earn the real money, which, makes that this has still been the largest contract that that the Cardinals have given to any player. So, it's a little bit, that's where the homework clause came in there. That's where the workout bonuses and, you have to go be part of he gets what? Like $1.9 million for being part of the off-season program. And Keim texted, he's all, why the Browns felt so compelled to pay Watson like that is baffling. Now, Murray did get his deal, and it beat Watson's deal by $500,000 because he got $230.5 million instead of the $230 that Watson. So beat that. The $103 million in guarantees beat the previous deal. Other than it was the most guarantees before, other than the Watson deal. And the Cardinals are happy because 2027, 2028, there's zero guaranteed money. And so they have an out like that. But Dean Spanos texted Bidwill to congratulate Bidwill and was saying, "Hey, your deal helps us for our quarterback next year," referring to Justin Herbert. Bidwill said these QB deals are getting expensive, but we're limiting the fully guaranteed money. You have some pretty good language. Thankfully, we have a quarterback that's worth paying. So at least there's that. At least Bidwill in a text expressed that he believed in Kyler Murray. It's like, this guy's worth paying. But it's, oh my goodness. And there's more to it. There's more to it because it deals with Lamar Jackson's contract. It's just the fact that, so that I guess the one piece of information that we got is that Kyler was looking for a fully guaranteed deal once Watson got his fully guaranteed deal. Murray wanted one too, and offered it and presented a contract to the Cardinals that would have gotten him that. It would have been less per year. I think it wouldn't have been as large as Watson's, but it would have been fully guaranteed as well. So it wouldn't have reset the market, because Kyler's contract a little bit reset the market because it beat Watson's by a little bit. And then other than the guarantees, it was the most guaranteed in a deal. So, but my goodness, the fact that owners are, and that ties into the second round picks right now, because there's 30 of the 32 second round picks are unsigned. And that is because, what do second round picks do? They have to negotiate how much is guaranteed. First round picks, easy, fully guaranteed. And then after that, the second round it varies.
Well, and again, going back to it, who is signed and they got a fully guaranteed contract, right? So the first
ever in the second round.
And so that's what people don't understand is, again, these things all come down to, if one team sets the precedent, then every team or every player,
every agent now is like, hey.
And by the way, who signed those fully guaranteed contracts? The Houston Texans and the Cleveland Browns. Isn't it shocking that Cleveland's always in the middle of this? Because their owner is just like, yeah, whatever, I'm going to do whatever I want. I don't really care.
I wonder how renegade he is within the big boys club, the boys club
Right.
that is the NFL owners. Like, is he just, I don't care what we're doing, or is he a problem within that the other guys get upset at? Now, if we go back a few years, so it was pretty commonplace for the very top of the second round to get 3 full guaranteed years. Byron Murphy got 3 full guaranteed years. And I wrote a story recently about Will Johnson's situation last year. Was it Tyler Nubin? He was at the 47th pick. He got 2 full years guaranteed, and then about 80% guarantee on year 3. But now that you've got 2 that are fully guaranteed, now that affects and that impacts the down the line. So is it now 3 plus partial 4, 3 plus partial 4 until you get down? So, Johnson will get 3 full guarantees until you filter down to the end of the round where it's 2, maybe it's just 2 full guarantees. And so it's going to be interesting and see how long it takes for these second rounders to pick, because the Cardinals sitting there with Johnson are right in the middle. And so they are certainly waiting for the top down and the bottom up. If the bottom up comes up, they can say, oh, we'll just do above that. And if the top down happens first, then they'll have to slot it in right after the pick number 45 and 46. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But geez, but again, we look at this. Is anyone surprised at this? Not exactly collusion, but it's pretty much collusion.
Yeah, and you look at a couple of things too, right? There are teams. When teams try to set precedent, we see what happens. Cincinnati and Shamar Stewart, right? Like that is 1000% what ends up happening when teams try to set a precedent. Because the big thing about that is the language that can, yeah.
What can void the contract.
Right.
And a couple of shows ago, I shared what was in DJ Humphrey's contract. But apparently the Cardinals, I think, have had that in their language forever. It's that this year the Bengals are trying to do it.
Right. But they also negotiate it out a lot of the times, right? Like, yes, they come back, like the picks will come back and say, okay, this doesn't count. That, we're not going to do this, and this. But like you said, Cincinnati's never done it. Not never, but they've never like stood firm on it or negotiated it out of the contract, or not negotiated out of the contract. And this year they're basically like, nope, we're not budging. Like, and so again, when teams do that, it usually becomes this public circus. Whereas it's very under discussed that 30 of the 32 second round picks are not signed yet, right? Like it's not a conversation that's being had.
This is a game of chicken right now as we come up a month away from training camps.
Well, and I think what it boils down to, Jess, is that Seattle hasn't done it. They had the first pick in the second round, and so the second pick, they had the second pick. I think it was. They took Nick Imenwari, but the first pick of the second round, Carson Schwarzenegger, again, Cleveland Browns, signed his
fully guaranteed.
And so now it's like, okay, everybody's got to sign their contracts to fully guaranteed. And by the way, the first and second pick. So that means Imenwari is the third pick of the second round. So yeah, the first 2 picks of the second round signed fully guaranteed contracts. So other teams are basically like, and I guess it's starting with Seattle, right?
Yeah.
Like unless Seattle signs that contract, then it's not going to happen. And Acme Packing Company, the Packers SB Nation site, has a good one. Because if you look at it, Ashton Gillette was like the third pick of the third round. I'm not doing the math properly, I know. I think it was the 66 pick, so maybe the second pick of the third round. And he only got 1.5 million guaranteed. Higgins, the second pick, got 11.7 million. So like, it's not like we're talking about chump change, right? Like, we're talking virtually like for Will Johnson, Cardinals picking right in the middle of first and last in the second round. We're probably talking about $6-7 million in guaranteed money as opposed to what, 3. So that's a huge deal to these guys. And so their agents, especially if teams are going to start going, hey, yeah, we'll give these second round picks fully guaranteed contracts. Guess what? Agents aren't going to budge until other agents start to. And so that's going to be the biggest thing right now, is that until the guys at the top start to sign, guys in the middle and especially at the end of that second round, they're not going. An agent's not going to do a disservice to his client, but also other
agents also collude.
Well, yeah, they not only collude, they specifically do that for a reason.
Yeah, but guess what? Because there's nothing against agents representing players colluding, because they are like in the historic battles of management versus labor, they are labor. They can collude. That's what unions do. They collude within the union to try to get. But yeah, if management colludes, that's a big deal. I mean, and we've seen, like, if you're old enough to remember, I think it was the late 80s or early 90s when there was actually collusion found in Major League Baseball, which led to some really big names going unsigned until basically the start of the season. We're still a few years away, but we're about halfway through this CBA. Can't imagine. Let's hope that this doesn't.
Oh, this is going to be a complete, what show, especially as the money continues to go up for these TV deals, right? The TV rights deals are so big. They're making so much money. It's just going to get, players are going to, rightfully so, want a bigger chunk of the pie, and it's going to cause more issues that we're seeing. And fans, I mean, let's be honest, fans don't want to deal with this. They don't want to know how the sausage is made. They don't want to know about all of the crap that's happening behind the scenes. And that's really what it is. I mean, there is a ton of crap that happens behind the scene.
Oh, yes.
And that's why, 98% of the time, maybe 99, Jess and I are always on the player side. Like, hey, get paid. Like, do whatever it takes to get paid, get that contract, because it could be the only one you get that's worth a darn in the NFL.
Fans being fans of the team,
right,
tend to side with the owners for whatever reason. They ignore owners' selfishness and call the players selfish when they hold out and things like that. And no, it's all big and ugly. It's all big and ugly. But yeah, hopefully Will Johnson signed before training camp. We got a month, guys. We got a month. So, and yeah, I think that'll wrap up what we're going to talk about in this show. I know that we need to put together 1 or 2 rankings shows, and then Seth will probably off the hook until training camp after that show or 2, as I will line up the opponent preview shows that I've been doing the last few years and try to, unfortunately, I'm going to say, man, we play the Packers again this year, which means I've got to get a Packers guy, and that is always the toughest podcast preview every single time. So no Packers writer or podcaster wants to talk to me. And I promise you, I'm not mean on the show. Come on, guys. But that wraps up this edition of the show. It's episode 655. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. We'll be back again soon. Thanks for listening, as always.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up, See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red Sea Red, and of course, rise up, Sea Red.